Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about half steps, semitones, and steps and accidentals. So, starting from here, a half step or a semitone, which means a half step equals a semitone. Let me just write that down. Paste it right here. A half step equals a semitone. So, a semitone is the distance from one key on the keyboard to the next adjacent key. So, if I told you to move a half step from C, then you would move either to the left or to the right. So if I told you to move a half step from C to the right, then you would go from C to this key. And I'll tell you what that means later. So, and if I told you to go a half step from F to the right or left, and I said left, then you would go to this key because that's the closest adjacent key. So, yeah, as I said before, key 1 and key 2 is a half steps and they are next to each other, and this is the closest adjacent key you can move to. A half step is not always from a white key to the black key. Yes, that's true because if I told you to go from E and I said take a half step to the right, then it would have to be F, which is also not a black key. So a half step isn't always from a white key to the black key. Yes, in this example, key 1, key 2 are still next to each other, but it's not from a white key to a black key. So a whole step, meanwhile, is a whole tone or a simply tone. So you can say, or just call it a tone. I mean, it's the same distance as two half steps. So if I told you to move a whole step to the right, it would be two half steps. And you know a half step is from one key to the closest adjacent key in the direction that you want to move to. So if I told you a whole step to the right, this closest adjacent key to the right, that's one half step, and then another half step. So from C to D would be a whole step because it's two half steps. And each half step is what I told you before. And if I told you to move from C to the left a whole step, then it would be from C to B and then to this key. And I'll tell you what that key means soon. And so let's say I told you to move a whole step from F to the left. What would you get in that situation? I'll give you like 5 seconds. So the answer would be this key right here. And that's because when you move two half steps, it would be F to E, then to this key. Okay, so now that you understand whole steps, we can just skip these two steps and go to an accidental. So, there's two types of accidentals, and both of these are one of them. So, let's say I told you this. You don't know the name of it yet, but this is called a flat, and this is called a sharp. And an easy way you can remember it is saying the flat looks like the letter B, but just like curved at the bottom a little bit. So you can say, whenever you see the B, it's a flat. And then whenever you see the sign that looks like a waffle, that's a sharp. So whenever you see a sign that looks like a B, it's a flat, and if it looks like a waffle, it's a sharp. And yes, yeah, these are just saying what they are. So the flat, so the B, you can call it a B or you can call it a flat. Well, but most musicians call it a flat. So the flat lowers a note by a half step. So what I mean by lower is going to the left. So if you saw this sign next to a note, that means they want you to lower it to the left a half step. So whenever they say down, that means to the left, and whenever they say up, that means to the right. So if you saw this sign next to a note, that means they want you to lower it a half step to the left. So you saw the letter C, and there's this sign next to it, the flat sign. That means they want you to lower it a half step to the left. To the left. So it would be B, not this key, this key. So in the case of if it's a sharp, that means you see this sign, the waffle sign next to a key. They want you to move it up. So up is also right when you're using musical notation. So if I told you to use this key and it had a sharp next to it, then you have to move to this key because that's the closest half step to the right. So both of these mean both of these use half steps, but they're in different directions. So flat would be to the left, sharp would be to the right. And both of them use half steps. Yes, when you're typing, you can use the hashtag symbol to represent a sharp and the letter B to represent a flat. Yeah, this can be a waffle or a hashtag. You can just use it anyway. So, Okay, now let's examine the black key between C and D. Yeah, here's what I'm going to tell. This is when I'm going to tell you what these keys are all. So let's examine the black key between C and D. So on the piano it would be right here. So this is C and D. So this key would be called C sharp since it's a half step above C. And here's a quick explanation and a review. If you see this sign, the waffle sign, the hashtag sign, the sharp sign, whatever you want to call it, next to a note, that means you're moving right or up a half step. And see, as you can see, this is C, and this is C sharp. So this will be called C sharp because there's this sign next to it, and C is originally right here, but after you add the sharp, it'll go up to here because it's moving right one half step. And this would be called D flat because this is the note D, and when there's a flat sign on it, you move left a half step. And remember the flat sign. You can easily identify it by looking at it. It looks like the letter B, and it means move down or left a half step. So yeah, this is the letter D, the note D, and when you see this flat sign next to it, it means move left a half step, which means you would go to this. So this is D flat. This is also C sharp because C sharp would be moving right a half step to this. So most people call this C sharp or D flat because when it depends on your key signature, and you can look at a different video to see what that is. Okay, so another example would be from E to F. This is pretty confusing for most beginners because they just typically think that you go from a black key to a white key or white key to a black key. That's what a sharp and flat is, but that's not the case. If you see the letter F and you see this flat key, a flat sign next to it, means go to the left a half step. This is F. Well, a left a half step would be E. So E sharp would be this, and F flat would be this. Sharp is going up or right a half step, just to review. Yeah, so this double flat and double sharp, this is where it gets kind of complicated. So as you know, this is flat and this is sharp, what we learned earlier. And these two both, sharp means right half step, flat means left a half step. Double flat is 2 times to the left, and double sharp is 2 times to the right. So basically you're moving a whole step, which is 2 half steps. So if I told you to move a double sharp, this sign next to a note, and the note was C, then you would be going from this to this because that's 2 sharps. 1 sharp and then another sharp. Or it would be called a whole step. And a flat would be the opposite way. C, and then you see a double flat sign, that means you go to the left 2 times. So it'll be going from here to here, then to here. So C double flat would be here, and then C double sharp would be here. Just moving 2 times what the original symbol meant. And yes, when you're typing, you can use X and BB to represent these. Yeah, so we can skip that part since I already said it. And then the last thing, it's called a natural. Okay, so this is going to take a while to teach you, but when you're learning music, there's going to be, how do I explain it? There's going to be multiple lines in one measure. And then in that measure, the key signature is going to consist of multiple flats and sharps, but it depends on if the composer is using flats or sharps. So let me just search this up. Yeah, as you can see, in one measure, there's going to be a key signature which shows you when you're playing. This is for the ease of the composer because if you're gonna put a sharp and a flat symbol to every single note you want to be a sharp or a flat, that's gonna take forever. If you just put the notation, the key signature at the start of the song, that means from now on, whenever you play this note, it's always gonna have a sharp. And if it's flat, from now on, whenever you play this note, it's always gonna have a flat. That's for the ease of the composer because they don't want to write a sharp and a flat next to every single note. They want to raise and lower. So the reason why this natural exists is because sometimes you don't want that key to be sharp or you don't want that key to be flat. So in that case, you would put a natural symbol next to it. And whenever you see a natural symbol next to the note, it immediately lifts every single symbol that's other than the natural that's already on it. So let's say you have the key signature of E major and you get this note D sharp and there's a natural next to it. It's going to be D instead because the natural destroys the sharp. Yeah, so we'll learn more about the natural in the upcoming lesson, and that's all for today.